Welcome back. All right, we're roughly halfway through the season, and I figured, you know what, it's a good time to take a look at where we are, where things are when it comes to the playoff chase, and just keep it in simple numbers. So I've got the points percentage to rank everybody from 1 through 16 in the East, 1 through 16 in the West, and I've got the playoff line drawn in there as well by points percentage. And so it does paint an interesting picture. And if you're looking for 1v8, uh, you'd have some interesting matchups. You'd have Boston against Pittsburgh in the East. You'd also have Carolina and Washington. You'd have Toronto and the New York Rangers, and you'd have New Jersey against Tampa Bay. And that's, of course, with the idea that 1 and 2 would be your division leaders. And thankfully, you have 1 and 2 being division leaders. Same in the West. You'd have Vegas against Calgary. You'd have Winnipeg against Colorado, Dallas against Minnesota, and Seattle against LA. The interesting thing being, those are matchups where they're divisional foes against one another. And Seattle and LA would be highly entertaining, and we would get that anyways. So, in the case of going 1 versus 8, it does change things for some, but not for a lot. And a lot of the time I hear we need to go 1v8. I do think a lot of the time it might be Toronto fans who don't want to see Boston or Tampa again, and I totally get it. So we'll start with Boston. They're sitting with an 850 points percentage in the months of December and early January. They're 13 1 and 4. Ridiculous record. Of note, and I went with a division for each team. They're 11 and 0 against the Metro, so they haven't lost a single point against a Metro opponent. That's very impressive. So we'll see how things go in the second half of the season for Boston, but I would say they've achieved more than we would have thought they would have. So I'm going to go ahead and put an up arrow next to Boston because I feel like they're higher up than we would have expected. Carolina, they have a 713 points percentage. They're 13 2 and 2 in the months of December and January so far. Of surprise, they're 4 3 and 3 against the Central, meaning in 10 games they've only won 4 against the Central. I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what? Carolina's right around where we would probably have expected them to be. They were seen as a contender coming into the season, anyways. Same with Toronto, 695 points percentage. They're 10 4 and 2 in the months of December and January. Of a surprising note, they're 5 3 and 3 against the Pacific. So they've won 5 out of 11 against the Pacific. But again, I think they're right about where we would have expected them to be. New Jersey, 663 points percentage over the months of December and January. A bit of a hiccup here. They're 6 8 and 3. Against the Pacific, though, they're 7 0 and 0. So they love playing against Pacific Division opponents. You get 16 games against each division in the other conference. So they have 9 more games where they could pick up points against the Pacific. And with the way they've played in the months of December and January combined, yeah, they could use that. But I will say that New Jersey, compared to what was expected, definitely better than expected. Tampa Bay, 645 points percentage. They're 11 and 5 over the months of December and January. They're playing well. Again, finding a division where they have a surprise record, I would say the closest you get is 6 4 and 1 against the Metro, so they're a little over 500 against the Metro. But overall, they're right around where we expected them to be. So the big surprises so far, Boston and New Jersey. The New York Rangers, 622 points percentage. They've been 11 3 and 3 over the months of December and January, so they've recovered from a little bit of a slow spot there. They're 5 6 and 1 in their own division, though, so they need to tidy that up. That being said, yeah, they're right around where I would have expected them to be as well. Tampa Bay, 605 points percentage over the months of December and January. 13 3 and 3. They're 4 5 and 1 against the Central. A bit of a surprise that they have a below 500 winning percentage against the Central. But I'll say, too, for Washington, the 605, a little bit of a surprise. I'm going to put an up arrow because they did this without Backstrom. They did it without Wilson, and that wasn't expected. So I think Washington's a little bit higher than they were expected to be. Pittsburgh, 590 points percentage for them overall over the months of December and January, 9 5 and 2. So they went on that ridiculous 14 2 and 2 run, and they've kind of come back down to earth since then. They won the game last night against Arizona. We'll see if that turns things around. They are 7 0 and 0 against the Central. So they like playing against the Central. For Pittsburgh, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'll say they're right around where they would have been expected to be. Then you get to Buffalo. Buffalo has a 568 points percentage over the months of December and January, a record of 10 3 and 1. Now, the one thing that's worthy of note when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres record, they're 6 7 and 1 within their own division. So while I'm going to put an up arrow here because I think they're overperforming what we would have expected from them, they do need to fix that record against their own division. Because obviously in the first round, should they get into the playoffs, they'll likely be playing against a divisional opponent, and you want to make sure you have a good record against that divisional opponent. And that you play well in your own division. But we'll see, right? We've often seen where teams will be doing relatively mediocre during the regular season against an opponent, maybe a division, and then the playoffs roll around. It's not a problem. The New York Islanders have slipped a bit. They're 561 in their points percentage. December and January, they're 7-8-2. Of note, against the Central, they're 4-6-1. So they've only got 5 games left against Central Division opponents. They'll probably be happy about that. I would say for the Islanders, with where they are right now, I mean, they've fallen off the last couple of months, sure. Well, the last month and a week. But I'm going to leave them right around where, yeah, they're probably right around where we would have expected them to be. There. Eventually I catch up. Detroit, 513 points percentage for them. December and January, 5-9-2. They're a young team. And so, while I've seen a lot of complaining about Detroit, and the record in their own division's 4-8-2. The reality is they're a young team. I honestly think they're right around where I would have expected to be. I think that, sure, it would have been nice if they stayed in the hunt and made the playoffs, but it's not their year. And again, young team. We're seeing some sophomore slumping going on. It happens. And you've got a lot of other players coming into the lineup. And so, yeah, Detroit's a team that this thing just kind of happens. Now we get to Ottawa. They have a 500 record, but over December and January, they're 10-5-2, so they've improved. But November still sunk them. Against the Metro, they are 5-4-2. So they've won 5 out of 11 against the Metro. A bit surprising they're actually above that 500 mark against the Metro. But overall, I would say Ottawa's been a disappointment. So there's your first down arrow. Won't be the last down arrow, but yeah, it's been quite the disappointing start for Ottawa. The first half of the season for Florida, not great. 488's their point percentage currently. They've been 8-10 in the months of December and January. Every time it looks like they're putting it together, they don't. And against the Central, they're 1-5-1. So in 7 out of the 16 games they'll play against the Central, they only have 1 win. So while it looks like, well, it's against that division, it's only 16 games. That's 20% of your season. So for Florida, it has absolutely been a disappointing run. Down arrow there as they were expected to at least be a playoff team this year. So New Jersey getting to take advantage of Florida being off a little bit, I guess, if you want to look at who New Jersey replaced in the playoffs. Although if Florida was playing the way we know they could, it'd be Pittsburgh this below the line. But sure, from last year, yeah, New Jersey's the only team currently above the playoff line that didn't make it last year. So all of the talk about the turnaround in the East, it's been much ado about nothing, though that could change if Buffalo or the Islanders put it together and they end up making the playoffs. But who would they end up knocking out? That becomes the question. And for New Jersey, that's where things get a little nerve-wracking because, again, they've been below 500. I know they've been better the last week and a half, but Washington and Pittsburgh, pretty solid records overall, and I think Pittsburgh's going to turn around after that losing streak. But we'll see. Philadelphia is right around where we expected. I'm not even going to flirt with the idea of putting an up or down arrow there. 463 is the points percentage. 7-8-2 over the months of December and January. They struggle against their own division. They're 4-7-4. So 15 games played against Metro Division opponents. They've only won 4 of them. It's a big part of the reason they're where they're at. Montreal, 438 their points percentage over the months of December and January. 5-11-2. Against their own division, they're 3-6. So Montreal's right around where we expected them to be. I don't think there were many that expected Montreal to jump right back into the playoff hunt. I think there were some that got kind of excited early in the season, but again, it's a young team, and you're going to have setbacks. The depth's not fantastic. I think teams have been really focusing on shutting down Suzuki. They've done it pretty well over the last, 18 games here. So, yeah, that's something that happens, and for Montreal, they're going to have to get more offensive catalysts in the lineup, which should free up Suzuki a little bit. I think that's why Suzuki's numbers have fallen off. Columbus, 333 is their points percentage. They've been 5-13 over the months of December and January. But against the Pacific, they're 3-0-1. So they haven't lost a game in regulation. They have 12 games left against the Pacific, so maybe that helps. but there isn't any way to shine this up. Columbus has been a disappointment thus far this season. It's been quite the downturn. Not expected to be this poor. I don't know that, I mean, my prediction that they could somehow make the playoffs, sure, that was pie in the sky, doesn't happen, but I don't think anybody expected this to happen. All right, so that's the East. We move on to the West. We've got Vegas, 667 points percentage over December and January. They're 10-7-1. Of surprise and of note, against their own division, they're 5-6-2. Against the Pacific, they've struggled against teams like Vancouver and LA and teams that they normally are able to steamroll. So struggling against their own divisions, holding them down. Their 667 points percentage would have them fourth in the East. It is worthy of note because there is a sizable difference in the overall percentages needed to make the playoffs in the West from the East. That could even out in the second half of the season. But 561 for Calgary would get them above the playoff line. It would leave them two teams below the playoff line in the East. They'd be down tied with the New York Islanders in terms of their points. So it is something to keep an eye on. That being said, for Vegas, I think so far, I think it's a bit of a surprise they're the best team in the West so far. And again, 10-7-1 over the last month and a week, right? For Winnipeg, they have a 663 points percentage in December and January. They've been 12-7. 2-4 against the Metro division, so that's a division they don't like playing, and they've got 10 games left against the Metro. But overall, Winnipeg has been a pleasant surprise. So non-playoff team that's in, non-playoff team that's in, non. So that's 1, 2, 3 teams that are in the playoffs that were out last year currently. Nashville's under the line, Edmonton's under the line, St. Louis is under the line, but all three of them are really not that far off to count them out as of yet. So Dallas, 659 points percentage, 11-5-2 over the month of December and then the first week of January. Against the Pacific, they've struggled. They're 4-4, but overall their record's been very good. For Dallas, I'm going to put them as just even, like they've been right around where expected at this point. It's tough though. You know what? No, I think Dallas has been a little better than expected. Seattle's definitely been better than expected. So a lot of up arrows in the West. Sure, that's part of the reason I didn't want to give Dallas the up arrow, because I'm like, I don't want all of them to give us. Sure, why not? It doesn't matter. It doesn't do anything. 632 is the points percentage for Seattle over the months of December and January. A bit of a bobble there. They're 8-7-1 over their last 5 weeks. But still, they're 5-3 against the Metro. They've got a good record against every division and really have shown that Seattle is for real. And so that's a question that was being asked early in the season, whether or not they're for real, and I think, yes, they are. For the LA Kings, the 605 points percentage, I'm going to put just that they're right where we would have expected them to be. They're 11-5-2 in the months of December and January. But in 6 games against the Metro, they're 0-5-1, so they got 10 games left against the Metro. And that is something to keep an eye on because, again, 10 games is quite a bit out of 40. And so if they're not able to find wins there, that could very well affect their standing in the playoffs. Minnesota, 603 is their points percentage. They have a 12-5-1 record in the months of December and January. So again, this is why I've been ranking them highly on the power rankings. They've been playing pretty darn well. Against the Metro, they've only played 3 games. I did a double take when I saw that. They're 1-2 against the Metro. But I'll say that at this point, Minnesota's right around where they were expected to be. Colorado, 566 points percentage over the months of December and January. This injury-ravaged team, 8-2. So again, pegging off points and then hoping that when everybody comes back, they can really take off. But the good news is that even with the 8-2 record over the last month and a week, they are still above the playoff line, even by points percentage. 2-5-1 against the Pacific Division. So that's something that they will need to fix because they have a bunch of games left against the Pacific. But in general, well, I'm going to put a down arrow here because they're not where they would have been expected to be before the season started. I think they've played well considering all the injuries. For Calgary, 561 points percentage. They're 2-4-2 against the Atlantic Division. In the months of December and January, they've been 9-5-5. So they've won 9 out of 19 games. Or they've only lost 5 in regulation out of the last 19. So it really depends on how you see it. I mentioned this in last night's recap as well. The 5 overtime loss points, I think, are really hurting them. I think that if you have some wins there where you don't, I think that makes a huge difference, pushes them up the overall into a better picture. So right now, they're definitely in danger of falling out of the playoffs and maybe missing the playoffs. But if they were able to win these games and get those extra points, it could make all the difference in the world. The 2-4-2 against the Atlantic Division, a little bit of a surprise. I'm going to say compared to the predictions and where they were supposed to be, Calgary's been a little bit of a disappointment overall. Nashville 553 is their points percentage. 8-5-4 is their record over the months of December and January. Definitely buoyed by the goaltenders winning in their last 2 games. Against their own division, they struggle. They're 4-5-3. So they've won 4 out of 12 of the games played within their division. They're going to have a lot more games against their own division coming up in the second half. They've got to fix that. Nashville, I will say, has been a bit of a disappointment. They're below the playoff line here. They're below the playoff line in reality as well. No matter how you look at it, Nashville was supposed to be a playoff team, and they're not there right now. Edmonton, 549 is their points percentage. 8-7-3 over the months of December and in the first week of January. 5-5 against the Pacific Division is a bit of a surprise. They were supposed to be, owning the division, and there was a lot of talk about whether or not they'd end up first in the division. And so, yeah, a bit of a disappointment for the Oilers as well. That's 4 straight down arrows after 4 straight up arrows. You guys can let me know in the comment section below where you think a team's up or down arrow should be and who deserves or doesn't deserve to get credit for a really strong first half. St. Louis, 524 is their points percentage, or who deserves or doesn't deserve blame for a lousy first half, too. So for St. Louis, 524 is their points percentage, 9-7-3 over the months of December and January. They are 2-5-1 against the Atlantic. So again, that's something to keep an eye on because that means they got 8 games left against the Atlantic. Can definitely wreak havoc with the record. St. Louis has definitely not performed the way that we had expected before the season started. Vancouver, 474 points percentage. So one of 9 teams in the NHL that are below the 500 mark, which is odd because 500 you would think would be middle of the pack, but in the NHL with the 3-point system, it's not. So for Vancouver, they're 8-8 over the months of December and January. A lot of exciting overtime and shootout victories, but against the Metro, they're 1-6-1, and they've got an East Coast swing coming up. East Coast swings will usually submarine their playoff hopes, so this could very well be that time again. Vancouver has not performed as was expected before the season started. That should be where the down arrows end, though. So Arizona, 397 is their points percentage. They're 6-11-2 in the months of December and in the first week of January. Against the Pacific, their former divisional foes, 1-6-1. So not enjoying games against the Pacific Division, but Arizona's right around where they were expected to be. There wasn't an expectation for them to be better. San Jose, 390 is their points percentage, so we're into the 390 range. So there was only one team in the East that's below 400. There are 4 teams in the West, I should say, below 400. At 390 to get there, they're 4-7-4 over the months of December and January. 2-6-6 against the Pacific. What a bizarre record that is. 2 wins, 6 regulation losses, and then 6 losses in extra time. So they've won 2 out of 14 against their own division. Their save percentage hasn't been very good. They're scoring well. Their defense has been an absolute disaster. Their defense has been just awful in recent weeks. So yes, they can score, but scoring against them seems relatively easy right now. But again, San Jose, I think, is right around where we would have expected them to be before the season started. Anaheim, 341 is their points percentage, so their points percentage a little above Columbus. For those on the Bedard watch, Chicago's first, Columbus second, Anaheim third by points percentage, and then San Jose would be fourth. Anaheim 6-10-2 over the months of December and January, which, because that record's not as bad as a couple of the others, they're jeopardizing their position at the bottom of the league. They're 1-9-2 against the Central Division. They don't like playing against the Central, and we'll see whether or not that continues to be a thing in the second half of the season. But Anaheim was not expected to be better than this. So can't say that they're more disappointing or anything like that. Chicago, 308 is their points percentage. It is the lowest in the National Hockey League over the months of December and January. 4-13-0. So they're 4-13, Columbus 5-13, and when they met each other, they both won 1 game. So they're both pretty well equally as bad. Against the Pacific Division, however, Columbus is 3-0-1, Chicago's 5-5-1. So Chicago's surprisingly got a 500 record against a division this year. It is the Pacific Division, but Columbus has a much better points percentage, although there's a lot more games left for Columbus against Pacific Division opponents. For Chicago, this is what was expected. This is by design. I do salute fans that are still going out and cheering and all of that for these games. I thought that Max Domi last night after the game, where he thanked the fans and said they were the best fans and all that. I mean, when fans come out to a team that's losing like that, I will say those are your hardcore fans. Definitely not bandwagoners. But for Chicago, they're really hoping that they get Bedard this coming June. This is a team that's basically been torn down a bit, and they're going to be torn down a lot before all is said and done this season, with the idea that they're going to build towards the future. That building started in the last draft. It'll continue in this draft. And so there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Which teams have a down arrow that shouldn't? Which teams have an up arrow that shouldn't? All that other fun stuff. How terrible do all my arrows look? Let me know that in the comment section below, too. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.